we introduce the ASUS. You know the notebook. It's a very successful story here. Want to join? ASUS notebook. Yeah. You know, it's a very good story. Spun, yeah. Yeah, just in the beginning. Please join, have a seat. Where are you from? Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Chi Min Peng. This topic about talking about sustainable transformation in the ICT industry, and we have two speakers, and one is from the ASUS. ASUS, I think is the number one very solid notebook and also PC industry of the world. And one is from the Microsoft, and the first speaker is T.S. Wu. T.S. Wu is the Chief Sustainable Officer of the ASUS Tech Computer Corporation. And the second speaker is Raymond Bosch, and he's a Sustainable Solution Director of Microsoft. So the first one, and T.S. Wu, Zexing Wu, will be online. Okay, Raymond Bosch, hello, nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you,
he will be the first one
for having me.
Okay. The first speaker will be the Raymond Bosch, and Raymond Bosch, the floor is yours, please.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm very excited indeed to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation to speak to your audience, whether it's online or at the Blue Zone. So with that said, I will share my screen. I have a few slides to share with you as I do an introduction speech, or rather than a speech, maybe as I table a topic for further discussion later during the panel. So I think I'll take about 15 minutes to unpack this topic. I'll be talking to some visuals to make it a bit more interesting, and then I'll look forward to the continued conversation with the panelists. So the topic I chose to sort of kick off the conversation, right, and to have a productive panel today is supply chain decarbonization. You see, once you start to unpack sustainability and you go down the path of specifically environmental sustainability, right, then you take let's say a detour down to emissions land. Very quickly you realize that the topic that is top of mind for most organizations as it relates to environmental sustainability and specifically carbon is supply chain decarbonization, right? And the reason for that is because, with some notable exceptions, such as the financial sector, the emissions from products and services purchased, or the emissions from the supply chain, are the most material ones. That's true for most areas of manufacturing. It's true also in many areas of retail and consumer goods, etc. Right? So it's an important topic, and it's a topic that has been discussed at length also during COP28 this year. So that's it. It is not by any means or any stretch of the imagination a problem that has been solved. It is rather well understood, and everybody appreciates that it is material, and there are efforts underway to solve for it within the industry, including in the ICT industry, and I'm sure ASUS is no exception. But it is not a problem that anyone can claim to have cracked just yet, right? So it is top of mind for everyone in the industry, and myself representing Microsoft, I can share our point of view that indeed it is something that preoccupies us, right? And that we're actively engaged in to try to solve for. Now, if you think of, well, what is supply chain decarbonization? Really, it's about engaging with suppliers for the purpose of agreeing on mutually beneficial strategies to produce offerings that carry fewer embedded emissions, right? That benefits both parts of the equation, both the seller and the buyer, as you move across the value chain upstream. So that's supply chain engagement. And why is that not happening in pursuit of supply chain decarbonization? It's mostly a data problem, right? And I suppose I'm not stating anything controversial. So many things today, certainly in the digital realm, can be distilled into just simply a data problem, right? And very specifically, this is a data acquisition problem. Data isn't readily available, right? So the buyers don't have the data from their suppliers as it relates to the emissions of the parts and substances or the ingredients that make up the products that they themselves manufacture. When the data happens to be available, it isn't necessarily consistent, not consistent across their various suppliers. When it happens to be available and somewhat or reasonably consistent, it tends to be not of high quality. And if all the boxes are checked, ultimately, there's a lack of trustworthiness in the data, right? So even if one can claim that data is of quality, it's hard to have trust in that claim because of, well, lack of traceability and proof of provenance, for instance. And if you look at this slide that I have here as a visual, you'll see that there are ways to solve for that, right? And there are understood driving factors or levers to solve for those problems that are in part technical and in part not. Now that said, only a handful of organizations worldwide can afford to obtain data from their suppliers regularly with consistency and quality and trustworthiness. And the reason for that is because they can afford the time and the cost to implement very sophisticated systems, like systems of record for environmental management, right? And that's true both on the supplier and the buyer side. But what happens with the long tail, right? So all of the other thousands and dozens of thousands of suppliers of a medium scale manufacturer that are just not able to produce the data that the manufacturer needs to assess their emissions and therefore make informed decisions with regards to how to decarbonize the supply chain. So you'll see here that I've brought up in red the term scalability, right? So whatever solution exists today to really account for the emissions in the supply chain is something that only a handful of organizations upstream and downstream can afford. Therefore, this just doesn't scale enough, right? If you've been paying attention to COP this year, there's been a number of initiatives that have been announced. One by Greenome in partnership with the Swiss Stock Exchange and the Spanish Stock Exchange to create a platform to enable small and medium businesses to afford to report on their emissions, initially at the company level, and then increasingly with a focus on doing so at the product level. Another similar initiative is Massive Plus, which is an initiative that was born in Sweden as a consortium of some of the largest manufacturers in Sweden that had appreciated that they have the same problem, right? That they can't easily account for the emissions from all of those smaller suppliers. And again, a very smaller initiative in the form of Greenprint. It's a partnership between KPMG and the Monetary Authority of Singapore that aims to solve for the same problem. And I could keep listing more and more, and we see announcements like this being made regularly of those that are aiming to create platforms, as illustrated on the right-hand side of this slide, that solve for the problem of those SMEs in the middle section of this slide, right? So if you go to the left-hand side of the slide, you'll have the larger corporates, oftentimes Fortune 500s and somewhere below, that can afford the complexity of a comprehensive system of records for environmental management that can calculate the product carbon footprint of everything that they manufacture to then disclose that or share it with their clients. But in the middle, you have all of those SMEs that just simply for whom the existing solutions don't scale, right? And there you have this emergence of platforms on the right-hand side, and I listed a few examples of those that have been announced recently that aim to centralize what the large corporations on the left-hand side are doing and offer that as a lightweight service that then is available at a much lower cost to a longer tail of organizations, of manufacturers that can then compute with precision, with quality, with trust their emissions and share those upstream with their clients and so on and so forth. Now, those platforms, for the most part, haven't yet considered the problem of legal boundaries, right? And that's probably the next frontier that as an industry we'll have to tackle. And that is organizations aren't just going to freely share their data upstream or with these platforms. The data that they're asked to share to calculate with precision and with traceability and trust the emissions of their products is primary data. It's sensitive data in most industries, right? And here we're not talking about a technical problem as much as we're talking about a legal problem, right? Manufacturers, regardless of size, are just not going to get the blessing from their legal departments to share that type of data with platforms, which then aim to reshare that upstream with anyone potentially, without there being some legal contract involved in it, right? So there is a problem of legal boundaries that needs to be acknowledged. There are emerging standards or protocols, for lack of a better term, that deal with that. Of course, beyond the scope of a presentation like this, but it's maybe something that we'll have the opportunity to address during the panel. But there are emerging standards that allow organizations to share data with each other, to exchange data with sovereignty, right? While having their governance and their say-so of what happens with their data once it's been shared, regardless of who might be sitting upstream as a recipient of that data, right? So what we see, and I suppose we're here to discuss some insights as it relates to the industry, what we're seeing is an emergence of, or an increased adoption rather, of these data exchanges or data protocols that allow for the smooth sharing of data while respecting the legal boundaries or taking into consideration the sovereignty of organizations and, why not, nation states. Now, as I begin to wrap up this initial presentation, let's pause for a second to consider what these supply chains that we're talking about look like, right? So on the upper level, you'll have the brands, right, including ASUS, the OEMs. And then as you start going lower into, peeling the layers of the onion, so to speak, or going tiers below, then you get to the raw material suppliers or producers. And there's a lot of overlap the lower you go, right? So the raw material suppliers don't supply just into the ICT supply chain or the automotive supply chain or the luxury goods supply chain. They potentially supply to all of them, right? Which means, let's flatten this view, right? Which means that if we're thinking of these platforms that are emerging, what we expect is that there'll be some platforms that will win the battle in one supply chain, and those are not going to be the same aggregators or platforms that connect the dots in another supply chain, right? So what we see is that across different supply chains, we will have an emergence of different platforms that solve for this problem of data acquisition and data exchanging between participants. And one thing, and this is again my point of view, and is a point of view shared by many at Microsoft, is that we will see this, let's call it this range of options, depending on the size and the maturity and the sophistication of the organizations in the supply chains. Some of them will self-host systems of record for emissions management and data exchanges to exchange data with their tier 1 suppliers. Some of them will host shrink wrapped or packaged versions of that, let's say in a VM, if you will, right? And others will consume that as a service because they'll just not have the IT infrastructure or the resources to even consider running anything themselves, right? So we will see these data exchanges and data platforms proliferate with different formats, ultimately all of them connected, but catering to the resources available to their consumers, right, to their constituents. So with that, I get to the end of my presentation, which is to effectively decarbonize supply chains, collaboration is important. Having access to data is paramount. Being able to standardize data, being able to establish provenance for the data through traceability is important. Those, for the most part, are solved problems today. They just don't scale. Scale can be introduced, and we're seeing the emergence of that through platforms that act as aggregators. Now, those aggregators need to start acknowledging that there is a problem of legal boundaries or data sovereignty, and they need to be able to solve for that through adopting emerging protocols that will allow them to establish data exchanges. Those data exchanges, however, are not a one-size-fits-all. They'll need to make sure that both a tier one manufacturer and a very small supplier all have access to those data exchanges, and they'll have varying degrees of resources and sophistication to do so, right? So there needs to be an acknowledgement of that too. But lastly, the most important thing ultimately for this to succeed is also the acknowledgement that there are going to be multiple players trying to pursue this as a business opportunity. And several of them are likely going to achieve a reasonable amount of scale, right? They'll have enough gravitational pull to acquire a substantial amount of data from one or more supply chains so that they'll then be able to offer value to the upstream consumers of those data aggregation points or platforms. Now, the problem there is then a problem of fragmentation, right? If there was only one, it would be easy for everyone to consume the data. But because there's going to be many, then we'll run into a problem of where do you go to get the data that you need. So what we expect to see as well, probably in the next year or two, as all of this matures, is agreements between the various data exchanges and the data platforms that use those data exchanges to federate, where a platform that is serving manufacturers within the ICT supply chain is then federating with a platform that is working with suppliers within the retail and consumer goods supply chain, for instance. And it's at that point that I think we'll have achieved the nirvana or the holy grail, if you allow me the term, but we're still far away from that. So I welcome you all to think about this, to consider it. Maybe there's an opportunity for you in this. Maybe there's something that you're working on in terms of a project that might benefit from this point of view. I'm certainly looking forward to the panel conversation to explore this further.
Thank you, Raymond, and tell you the good story. I'm a data guy about the open data, and you talk about the data, the importance of data in climate change, or some, especially the supply chain. It's very important, but your talk is the most wonderful talk I have ever met, because some people want to engage about the data, green and the digital, the totally different people. You are the guy to link together. Thank you very much, and we hope to have a discussion later on. So right now, I would like to invite ASUS, Zhexin Wu, and he is quite famous because in that kind of field, he's a wonderful expert and teach everything and not greenwashing, but do the right thing. Please, Zhexin Wu, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for having me to be part of this seminar. I'm TS, Chief Sustainability Officer of ASUS. It's my great honor to have the chance to share ASUS sustainability journey with you. COP28 is a pivotal opportunity to correct course and accelerate action to tackle the climate crisis. This year, COP28 will take stock of progress on the Paris Agreement and chart a course of action to dramatically reduce emissions and protect lives and livelihoods. From where we stand, ESG is no longer a nice to have for business. Leaders must move from good intention to value creation, accelerating progression of ESG to differentiate in the market for capital and talent. ASUS constantly focuses on integrating sustainability into our business to position us as a sustainable and leading technology company. Now, let me introduce how we manage sustainability at ASUS. Becoming a world-class green leader in technology is not just a goal. It's also a principle that drives operations across our entire company. On this incredible journey towards sustainability, we continually leverage our technological leadership, data-driven rigor, and human-centered philosophy to create a net zero enterprise that drives the shift towards a circular economy with a responsible supply chain, creating shared value for each and every one of us. We embrace this principle to develop our 4 sustainability pillars. The first pillar is climate action, where we focus on how we collaborate with our partners across the whole value chain to target net zero. Next is circular economy. Here we leverage design thinking and technological advancement to minimize our impact on the planet. Our third pillar is responsible manufacturing. This refers to how we collaborate with our business partners to ensure labor and human rights protection in our supply chain. Last but not least, we have value creation, which includes how we create worldwide social impact by bridging the digital divide and promoting the digital inclusion. At ASUS, we have a profound desire in our hearts to make the world a better place. But we also know that good intentions are not good enough. For us, sustainability is a continuous journey. We constantly raise the bar for ourselves, translate our goal into day-to-day actions and tangible outcomes, and keep pushing towards a more sustainable future. To achieve this, we are digitizing data, adopting scientific management practice, and constructing sustainable value with core competency. We have also committed to contributing to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals so that our sustainability actions have a meaningful global impact. Sustainability is more than a brand image. Companies that fail to take up the challenge and instead continue to view sustainability through a compliance or ESG reporting lens will miss the opportunity to tap into lucrative new market and create winning business model. However, sustainability transformation requires a deep understanding of emerging technologies, strong engagement with stakeholders, and a series of investment tailored to each organization. This illustration shows how our sustainability organization structure has been designed to achieve firm's strategy. ASUS has experienced a 6-stage sustainable transformation in the past 2 decades. Sustainability in ASUS starts from the passive compliance and gradually turn into part of our core operations and value creation. We look forward to seeing sustainability becoming the next strategic growth opportunity in the future. To achieve net zero carbon emission throughout our value chain, ASUS has set science-based target with a 3-stage implementation approach. Reducing emissions within the value chain is the most critical step. We commit to enhancing our product's energy efficiency to be 30% better than Energy Star standard and requiring our key supplier to achieve a 30% reduction in carbon intensity by 2025. We've also committed expanding the use of renewable energy, reaching a 100% renewable energy across our global operations by 2035. Then we aim to investing in innovative technologies to remove our remaining carbon emissions and gradually driving the entire value chain towards net zero by 2050. Setting science-based targets supports an ambitious decarbonization roadmap, clarifying the alignment with the Paris Agreement. I'm very glad to share that our near-term targets were validated by Science-Based Target Initiative in October 2023. We commit to reduce Scope 1 and 2 GHG emissions by 50% by 2030 from the base year of 2021, and reduce Scope 3 emission by 30% in the same time frame. We've also commit our long-term target and will get the long-term goals verified by 2025. This illustration demonstrates a series of our strategic moves to fulfill the net zero target. The comprehensive GHG emission inventory is the foundation of everything. Next, we use the TCFD framework to identify and quantify the risk and opportunity associated with GHG emissions, and based on this, set ambitious reduction targets. After establishing our goals, we progressively drive the entire value chain towards net zero by promoting reductions within the value chain, expanding the use of renewable energy, and ultimately offsetting the remaining emissions with high-quality carbon credit. On top of emission reduction, the path to net zero comes with significant business opportunity. We anticipate that through the execution of net zero roadmap, we will change our business model from linear to circular, investing in emerging clean technologies, and eventually create strategic growth opportunities for ASUS. A complete GHG inventory helps us understand emission hotspot, enabling us to drive necessary reduction measures. Based on the findings from GHG inventory presented here, our primary emission sources are concentrated in Scope 3 indirect emissions. Specifically, emissions from the supply chain and product energy efficiency account for the vast majority of our overall emission. In contrast to the take, make, waste linear model, a circular economy is a systematic approach to gradually decouple growth from GHG emission. In ASUS, circular economy transformation represents a series of practical actions, including circular supply chain, product life extension, product as service, sharing platform, and recovery and recycling. ASUS employs the principle of design thinking to drive innovation in product development, focusing on understanding customers' desirability and identifying optimal solutions that balance technology feasibility and business viability. We have adopted eco-design approach to decrease carbon footprint by using environmentally friendly materials. Another way for carbon reduction is elevating product energy efficiency. Our laptop energy efficiency exceeds the Energy Star standard by 34% on average. Additionally, our sustainability efforts are verified by leading global eco labels such as EPEAT. Our eco-friendly product revenue made up 87% of our total product revenue in 2022. The consumer electronic industry is known for its complexity due to a combination of technological advancement, rapid innovation, global supply chains, and evolving consumer preference. To manage and keep hundreds of suppliers on the same page in decarbonization becomes a huge challenge. ASUS considers sustainability, innovation, quality, lead time, cost, and service as important parameters in supply chain management. ASUS divides a number of suppliers into different levels based on carbon management capability and carbon emission intensity, and adopts different management approaches. We provide multiple resources to different level suppliers, especially for those emissions is high and management capability is low, to drive the entire supply chain towards a low carbon transformation. ASUS is now a full member of Responsible Business Alliance, the highest level in the world's largest industry coalition dedicated to corporate social responsibility in supply chain management. Our team, our tantalum, tungsten, and gold utilize 100% sources from qualified smelters. We are also the first company to receive the ISO 2400 Sustainable Procurement Certificate. As increasing number of suppliers gradually to initiate GHG inventory, set reduction targets, adopt renewable energy, and actively implement various reduction measures. In 2022, ASUS key supplier emission intensity has decreased by 24% compared to the 2020 baseline. ASUS conducts product carbon neutrality with a three-stage implementation approach. First, we precisely calculate the carbon footprint of products of the entire life cycle through the international methodology, then publish a product carbon footprint report certified by a third party. Our intensive assessment process has led to impressive results. Our expert book became the world's first carbon footprint verified commercial laptop. Second, we conduct the carbon reduction strategy, including the use of environmental friendly material, energy saving design, and supply chain carbon reduction process to make all out effort to decrease the carbon footprint. Finally, we offset the residual carbon emission by high quality nature-based carbon credit and complete the third-party verification to ensure the transparency and accountability. The recent launches of ASUS commercial laptop and the new Zen book perfectly represent our focus on sustainability and design thinking. These two carbon-neutral laptops adopt post-consumer recycled plastic, ocean-bound recycled plastic, post-industry recycled metal, and FSC-certified packaging, and offset residual emission by using nature-based carbon credit. We will further incorporate carbon topics into our new business model in the near future. Our sustainability strategy of focusing on fundamental and result has received widespread acclaim. We are proud to be listed in a number of international responsible investment index. This year, we are especially proud to be included in the Corporate Knight Clean 200 Index, selected by the Financial Times as one of the climate leaders in Asia Pacific, and listed as one of the world's best company in Time magazine. All of this affirm our commitment to making sustainability a core part of our business. Climate issue not only challenge the resilience of a company, but also give us an opportunity to build a better future. Companies can identify opportunities for innovation by global challenge and convert them into corporate strategies to grow in a more sustainable and inclusive direction. I hope all of you have enjoyed this introduction. ASUS is constantly searching for the incredible and creating shared value for everyone. Let's sustain an incredible future together. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhejing. Can we go back to the last 3 pages? Because what I know is the first net zero notebook, right? The first net zero. Is this one? This one? This one? Is there one?
Yes.
Net zero.
Yeah.
Net zero.
It's a carbon neutral laptop.
Carbon neutral.
Yes.
In average, one notebook, how much with the carbon credit? I mean, how many?
Before conducting the reduction plan, the average carbon footprint of a notebook is around 300 to 400 kilometers.
400.
Yeah.
300 to 400.
Yeah, kilometers.
Okay.
Per laptop.
Per laptop.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
okay.
we especially emphasize the reduction plan within the supply, within the value chain.
Oh,
we
wonderful.
Not using
Yeah.
The carbon credit in the first time because we think it's kind of greenwashing activities.
Okay.
We make all our effort to reduce the carbon footprint and offset the residual carbon emissions by high quality nature-based carbon credit.
Yeah.
To achieve carbon neutral.
Oh,
That's what we want.
wonderful. So, sir, where are you from?
I'm from Nigeria.
Are you a user of ASUS?
Yes, I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yes. This is why I would like
Thank
to, yes, this is why I would like to speak with you about a couple of things. So I am the Director General and the CEO of the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria. So, which means we have over 40 million small businesses in our community, and I'm directly in charge of their coordination, modernization, as well as their operations in Nigeria. So my question, I have two questions. The first one was for Mr. Mr. Bosch
Poch, yeah, from Ramen Poch, yeah.
from Microsoft.
Maybe can you sit here? Maybe because we have camera, everybody can watch you. Yeah, there. Welcome to be our. Yeah.
Thank you. So I was talking about, he was talking about data, because I am in charge of over 40 million small businesses in all of Nigeria. And I wanted to ask, what is the best way, what's the best framework, what's the best mechanism for us to get these small businesses to be able to share data? Because when this data is shared, from what we're seeing, we can make informed decision as to how much we are saving carbon emission and what needs to be done. So what can we do to help with small businesses sharing that data? And for you, sir, my question is, I feel like, first of all, I need to applaud you. That's why I was clapping for all the firsts. Thank you. I need to applaud you. That's why I was clapping for all the work that you've done. Firstly, in getting all the awards for sustainability, but more importantly, to ask you that, let's say, to whom much is given, much is expected. What can we do to have an ASUS Sustainability Center set up in Nigeria? Because we are, in all of Africa, we are the highest consumers of the ASUS laptops. What can we do to get a lot of these small businesses to start to think sustainability? So can we have, it would be nice to sign like an MOU or an understanding that we can get ASUS come to Nigeria and set up a sustainability center, and also set up a digital center like you've done and donating laptops.
Okay.
So yeah, you want to answer first?
I think quick response to your question, and again, thank you for to be part of the seminar. And I think I'm very happy to hear your advice. So let's stay in touch. Feel free to reach out to me and for further discussion in the future. Okay. Thank you.
Later on. Leave the business card. Okay. Continue
We do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Raymond, from Nigeria, have the questions, and because your talk is totally very wonderful. I will invite you to Asia, because I know lots of the data guy, and they did not know the climate change, and you make a good bridge, talk about the data silo, blah blah blah, and wonderful. Want to have a feedback?
Yes, absolutely. As I was listening to the gentleman for Nigeria, before we even go into the tactics that one would want to employ to acquire data from such a large amount of constituents, the constituents being the small and medium businesses in Nigeria, before we even explore the tactics, I would call out the fact that it's the type of organization that you head or that you head up that we see emerging as the data steward for all of these emissions data that the upstream clients of your constituents, right? So the manufacturers, the small businesses that you serve, want to acquire data from, right? So case in point, the example I gave earlier of Massive. Massive is a consortium of manufacturers in Sweden that have adopted I would say, a national or nationalistic approach even towards solving the problem. But of course, they acknowledge that supply chains are interconnected globally, but they want to act locally to then serve supply chains globally. I think in Nigeria, based on what you've described about your organization, you're likely in a position where you can do something very similar, right? Where you can spearhead the implementation of a platform that helps scale data acquisition towards all of those small and medium businesses in Nigeria so that they can then respond to the requirements from their clients, potentially out of Nigeria, right? So what are some of the data acquisition tactics that we see being implemented successfully? Well, first of all, you have to understand that based on the millions of constituents that you serve, it's very likely that many of them are not highly technified, right? Or systematized, that they don't have an IT department, right? Or maybe even a computer. So any efforts to start to collect data from them have to start with that realization in mind. And therefore, the barrier of entry has to be as low as possible, right? So it has to be manual data acquisition. There's unlikely going to be IoT sensors deployed in their manufacturing facilities, right? So you'll have to, if you're thinking of building a platform that serves them and that acquires data from them and that calculates emissions on their behalf, it has to start with some approach towards manual data acquisition, right? And then you can start improving that towards more automation and integration, but initially it has to be purely manual and probably with an interface that supports mobile devices, right? Or feature phones, not necessarily even smartphones. So, I mean, this is a topic, of course, that excites me a lot, and we could speak about this for hours, but I'll just table those two thoughts, right? That I think you're in a unique position to help solve the problem in for those organizations in Nigeria, but you need to really think low tech, right? Not high tech.
Okay, thank you, Raymond. I have a question to Zexin and later on to the Raymond, because ASUS make a very strong commitment to make about the climate change and also the carbon reduction. And can you share how to guide the supply chain toward the low carbon transformation? Because Raymond also talked about the data, how you use the data to make, because there were lots of silo there, how you overcome the problem. And I have also the same question to Raymond, because what do you think about ASUS? And they also planning to do that, just I know. And do you have any kind of suggestion what they can do a better way? Because it's not easy job, you know, right?
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Dr. Peng. Okay, and thank you for your question. In recent years, environmental, social, and governance issues have become increasingly prominent, and many companies have felt the pressure of supply chain disruptions and increasingly complex environmental changes. We believe that companies should establish adaptable supply chain to address complex supply sustainability issues and assist in effective supply chain management. And Paris Agreement has clear requirements for supply chain on climate issues, urging companies to enhance mitigation and adaptation capability building. In our view, big brands bear the responsibility to help their supply chain to build corresponding capability, from identifying emissions hotspot, setting reduction target, implementation reduction actions, and promoting renewable energy. Especially the emission from the supply chain account for a significant portion of the overall GHG inventory, as I present earlier. To manage and keep hundreds of suppliers on the same page in decarbonization becomes a huge challenge. First of all, we build the consensus by repeatedly communicating to our suppliers that carbon management is not just a moral appeal. Equipping with carbon management capability is critical for future collaboration with ASUS. Then we categorize our hundreds of suppliers based on their carbon management capability and carbon emission volume. We conduct the annual audit to investigate the environmental footprint, offering comprehensive assistance and guidance mechanism to suppliers who are unfamiliar with carbon management, and strengthening collaboration with leading suppliers. We embedded suppliers' ESG performance into our quarterly business review providing a solid incentive to encourage suppliers to be more willing to invest effort in GHG reduction. And furthermore, I want to emphasize here that digital empowerment helps effectively manage the complex carbon emissions in the supply chain. ASUS is developing a carbon management platform. This platform is based on a dual cloud architecture concept, combining a private cloud and a public cloud to collect and monitor real-time activity data. By incorporating blockchain proof of storage, proof of evidence, and validation in a three-phase data trust mechanism, the platform ensures all the carbon flow is verifiable, transparent, and trustworthy, enabling data-driven management decisions and facilitate a smarter, more efficient digital transformation towards a low-carbon supply chain. That's my answer to your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's very not easy, right? It's the silo.
Yeah.
Lots of silo. Yeah. It's not easy. Yeah. Okay, Raymond, you have some feedback, suggestion to the ASUS?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would applaud Mr. Wu's commitment to sustainability, of course, on behalf of ASUS, and I'm really impressed by all the initiatives that have been listed. And I was particularly excited when I saw in one of the last slides, Mr. Wu, where you mentioned that you have this framework to address the I think it was the 42% of emissions that corresponds to the supply chain, where you list that those sort of 4 pillars of a strategy around evolutionary, strategic, developing, and potential. And in the potential quadrant, you listed I presume it's a potential initiative that you might be considering that involves assisting your suppliers in establishing a carbon management capability, right? Which is, it's more or less, if not exactly what I had been describing in my initial presentation, right? Where we see this proliferation of platforms that help smaller players do their carbon accounting because the smaller players just don't have the sophistication or the resources to do so, right? And I suppose you've seen the need to help your suppliers help themselves. And as soon as they're able to do that, they'll also help you have a better catalog of the emissions from the parts and substances that you buy from them, right? So it's a bit of a self-serving proposition, but everybody wins as a result. So I found that very exciting and interesting that you're working on that. And what I would see is...
Okay, thank you. Oh, no sound.
Thank you, Raymond, and we are looking forward to further cooperation with Microsoft in the future.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Sir, you from Nigeria? You are user of ASUS. Do you expect the net zero notebook?
Also the user of Microsoft.
Yeah.
Match made in heaven.
For Ramos, I'm looking forward to working with you on a framework where we can get small businesses. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I said I was looking forward to getting a framework where we can get small businesses to do the reporting of data emission, of carbon emission, and the data that they need for us to make informed decision. So if you can get your contact to a framework, that'll be fantastic. And for you, sir, I need your commitment on coming to set up the ASUS Sustainability Center in Nigeria. But what I didn't see is a lot of gender participation in sustainability. If you can share with me, like, how many women, because we have a lot of women in Nigeria that are in innovation. I would like to see how you're doing that, the sustainability with women, and how we can get women back in Nigeria to be a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I still have a question to Raymond, because I'm a data guy. How to make a standard for the data flow is very important. I'm wondering, in the climate change issues, when our pavilion is called digital cross screen, do you have any kind of a suggestion how to make a clear way, a clear roadmap? How can we break the silo effect of the data?
Yeah, very good point. So there's two parts to this problem, right? One is what to share, and
Yes.
if we're talking about standardization and data flows, it's important to identify first what are we sharing, and therefore then how we structure it, right? Which standard do we conform to when representing this data before we even share it? And then it's how do we effectively share it, right? What are the protocols or the channels used to exchange this data with confidence, with sovereignty, with privacy? So there are already emerging and very quickly moving into established standards for solving for these problems. In the what to share, Microsoft, for instance, is part of the Pathfinder framework, which is a standard that emerged out of COP26 in Glasgow that describes the payload itself, right? So what format the data should be that describes the product carbon footprint. In terms of how to share that, again, standards that are emerging that gradually we'll see them move into ISO standardization, for instance, such as data spaces, right? So I'm somewhat of a data geek, so it's easy for me to go down the rabbit hole. I don't want to necessarily carry you all down through that rabbit hole, but I'll just table that here for further discussion, right? So the Pathfinder framework, potentially a solid standards to represent product carbon footprint, data spaces, which we expect to go into ISO standardization at some point in the future, a good standard for exchanging data, right? And ultimately will be a framework, right, that will combine various standards to satisfy the problems of the companies that need to use it.
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. Actually, in these 3 days, and we invited some speaker from Tokyo University, the Professor Noburo, and he also mentioned about the importance of how to make an ecosystem to share the data. So especially the scope 3, and so probably Microsoft and all of the Asia country and also for Africa, we can combine together to break the record. I mean, break the cycle, and it's very important. Let's try to do this. Thank you very much. Let's finish the talk. And thank you, sir. You jump into to be our panelist. Sorry, but it's very wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you in Taiwan. Thank you.
Mr. Wall, thank you very much.